Welcome to the WIEF 10th WIEF Global Discourse on Cybersecurity for Micro, Small and Medium Enterprises. Theme for today would be under Risk, Adversity and Trust. Before I hand over the floor to our moderator, allow me to briefly introduce him as Nordin Abdullah, Managing Director of Glen Ray Sendirian Berhad, Malaysia. Over to you, Nordin.
Thank you very much, and of course, welcome to everybody out there. And it's indeed my honor to moderate today's session. Today, we've got with us three leading voices from the industry, and of course, I will start with Dr. Haji Amruddin Abdul Wahab, who is the CEO of Cybersecurity Malaysia, and also joining us all the way from the US. Ms. Riva Lesonsky, sorry. I have to improve there a little bit, but she's the president and chief executive officer as well of GrowBiz Media of the US. And none other than Mr. Bobby Varanasi, who is the founding chairman and CEO of Matazel Consulting Inc., also with operations in the US as well as across Asia. So today we've got a very packed program for you, and we're going to get straight into this. And I'm going to pass the floor over to none other than Dr. Amruddin to kind of set the stage for what is going on with cybersecurity. How does it impact these smaller and medium organizations as well as the micro organizations? And we'll get about 5 to 6 minutes from Dato, and then pass it over to the other speakers. And then after that, we'll open up the floor for questions, and of course we'll dig into that. So if you have any questions straight away, just put them in the question part, because we do have people from all across the world joining us. So just stick those in, and we'll try to get through all the questions for you today. So with that, Dato, over to you, and we look forward to hearing what you've got to say.
Thank you, Nordin. Assalamualaikum, and very good day to everyone. Firstly, thank to WIEF for inviting me to be part of this global discourse on cybersecurity for micro, small, medium enterprises. Basically, if we look into our current world nowadays, especially the digital world, we are seeing that we are moving into what we call a highly connected world. And if you look at the statistics as of October 2020, there are about 4.6 billion internet users nowadays globally. And we can see nowadays, especially during this COVID-19, people reliance on the internet and digital technology in their day-to-day activities, and also even in their business operations, increasing. And this digital technology has now become a vital tool for organizations and even nations to progress economically, socially, politically, etc. And with more speed being given to this connection, you can see that more faster internet connection. So it also enables organizations, small or big enterprises, to intensify their business by venturing into various e-activities, such as e-commerce, e-training, e-procurement, e-learning, tendering, etc. Because we believe that we can use this technology, the internet, for productivity, to enhance efficiencies, to reduce costs, etc. But we also at the same time need to understand when it comes to technology, just like any other technology, it is also a double-edged sword. There are the good side of it, but at the same time, there's also the dark side of it, which we need to understand, and with more emergence of technology, such as the IR 4.0, with this big data, with AI. So the environment, the cyberspace environment, and with all this convergence of technology, making it more complex and more sophisticated. And as such, at the same time, we need to understand that the vulnerabilities are there because of this new technology, and the risks are there, and that also applies to the medium, to the micro, small, medium enterprises. And if you look at the study by Cisco, there's a report on SME with regards to Malaysia, Cisco Malaysia. They say that, for example, the SME digitalization contributes to about 75 billion ringgit to 99 billion ringgit to the GDP by the year 2024. So that shows how much now even the small medium enterprises are moving towards digitalization. And in the context of Malaysia, the 98.5% of all business are SMEs, and it contributes to 38.3% of the GDP of Malaysia. That shows how big the contributions of the SMEs to the economy of Malaysia, and the fact that now also it embarking into digitalization, it also at the same time, while it is good for their productivity, for efficiency, etc., it also exposes them vulnerable to the possible attack of this attack during this time. And there's a data that been collected stated that about the purchase or the upgrade of IT hardware. It shows that about 18% basically the tech investment by the SMEs, while only 14% is focusing on upgrade of software, while only 11% on cybersecurity. So these are some of the statistics with regards to the SMEs and also related to digitalization exercises in Malaysia. And obviously, as I mentioned just now, we need to see internet, we need to see digital technology, just like any other technology. It can be used for good, but at the same time, it can also be harm to you if we do not have the necessary precaution or measures to protect ourselves, especially in this borderless world, because the attack to the SMEs can come from anywhere, anytime. Because no longer like a traditional warfare, it is a very obvious one-to-one, more like I would call it symmetric warfare. But when it comes to the aspects of digital warfare or cyber warfare nowadays, it is asymmetric and it can happen anytime. So by anyone. So we the need to prepare ourselves, get ourselves ready. And some of the issues and concerns when it comes to SMEs and cybersecurity is about the lack of information security awareness, and which resulted in sometimes the haphazard management of the information or even the assets of the company. And second, managing the information security may be seen as costly to SMEs, so they may procrastinate or they may not put it as a priority. And third, probably SMEs believe because they are small, so they may not be noticed and they take for granted. And as such, they may lack, I would say, preparedness when it comes to cyber attack. So these are the background, and I hope that that will start our discussion for the next few minutes. Thank you, Nadia. Back to you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Dr. Amiruddin. Really appreciate it. And just looking at this concept of an asymmetrical, for me, I look at it as an asymmetrical battle space, a five-dimensional battle space as well. And I think this is where we start to really get into some gray area. Now, Ms. Ruga, tell us a little bit about what's going on in the US and how some of the smaller companies looking to deal with this new reality in terms of both threats and opportunities, if you don't mind.
Yeah, so thank you, and thank you for inviting me. I'm more than excited to be part of this panel. So I think part of the problem here in the US, it's twofold. One, despite all the advances in technology, we had a lot of the small and micro enterprises who weren't really that into having a website. It always surprised me the number of businesses that didn't have websites at all. So when the pandemic hit, and businesses had to go home and a lot of retail stores had to close for at least 2 months, those people were caught completely unprepared. Like, what do? We don't have a website. We don't have e-commerce. We just had our store. So they not only had to get on board with e-commerce, but then it was the matter of how do I protect my site, my employee site, because they're home. And in a lot of cases, people who maybe sat in an office with a desktop were sent home and told to use their personal laptops totally not protected, number one. Number two, in a lot of cases, the kids in the household think that's a shared computer. And I heard like 2 years ago, an enormous number of threats come in from kids going on gaming sites, you know, to play, like even little kids to play games, that there's a lot of threats that come in that way. So that was one problem. Two, it's as you stated before, a lot of the businesses weren't prepared. They're not sophisticated. They don't have IT personnel. They don't have it set up where they're protected. And so many small businesses here in the US and in Canada actually think, I'm too small. No one's going to bother me. Who cares about my small business? So, you know, who's going to be hacked? Well, I'll tell you my own personal story about 7 years ago or so. We have a website, smallbizdaily.com, and we'd log on every morning. And I got up, and I'm in California, so I'm behind the rest of the US. And I get up and I look, and there's all this weird language on my site. There's weird pictures. We're taken over by, and I just kind of sat there for like 10 minutes staring at the screen going, okay, what do I do now? And so I called my partners, and we called our web guy, the guy who hosts and it took them 2 weeks to fix the problem. So we were down for 2 weeks. And then because so much came down, it took us probably conservatively like 4 months to restore all the content that we had lost. So it was, and there were only 3 of us at the time. And so it was a tremendous drain on our resources to fix what we, and I still to this day, like, why would anybody hack us? We don't sell anything online. So it's not like somebody was after credit card numbers or anything else. And sometimes it's just for sport, right? And so every small business needs to realize that they're vulnerable because it's easy to hack small businesses because we don't have the security systems set up to withstand those attacks.
Interesting. And I think now moving on to Bobby. Bobby, what have you seen, especially in the last, really 12 months, but with the change that we've seen in COVID-19, everyone has moved home. Everyone has kind of gone down this path of online. But what have you seen across Asia and in different regions? Have there been any trends that we need to be aware of, and have there been any learning points which have really come out of this crisis?
Yeah, thank you. Let's take a look at the developed world first, and then we'll come to the developing world, so we can kind of make some comparisons. The developed world, as well as the developing world, all of them were unprepared for the random shift in moving into a work-at-home mode. Now, what we did, as would everyone do, is to keep the lights up. And the only way to keep the lights up is to get the assets out the office in the same working conditions, and hope that you will be able to continue to operate with certain levels of lost productivity, if you like, right? But nobody was ready for the conversations around continuity. They were looking at flipping. It's almost like a recovering from a disaster that struck us one fine morning. As business continuity related conversations came to be, that is when the discussions started getting a lot more deeper and integral about what are we trying to protect. It no longer was just a conversation about cybersecurity. So let's expand that universe. It is called your digital assets security. You got a whole bunch of assets, from your desktops and laptops to your servers, to your data centers, to your networks, to your websites, like Riva and Dato were saying, to your portals, to your payment interfaces, payment gateways, to all the data that you are hosting either on a cloud or a third-party provider. Now, you have to take a holistic look at the entire piece of the puzzle. Large corporations have struggled for the better part of 6 months to get that done. So I am not sure if there is any MSME on the planet who can actually say, I can do that very easily. It just does not work in a very linear fashion, unfortunately. What we have happened to do, therefore, is started leveraging a lot of the human trust with our people. I think in COVID-19, one thing that we have seen is people have begun to trust their employees and colleagues a lot more than would normally the law allow for or a policy allow for. The policy definitely does not allow for it, but we are looking at fixing and patching up problems because we have bigger problems to solve. But now the questions are coming up on the forefront. How are we going to make that entire environment extremely robust, where you're not beholden to an environment which is in your control, which is your office space? You're infringing fundamental rights by, what do you call, probing into someone's home, for example. You're not sure, like Riva, like you rightly said, who is looking at the back of you and watching what you're doing on a system. All of those things, as technology solutions are coming to play, things like screen scraping, things like automatic turnoffs, visual identifications, biometrics, these are all works in play, but they're extremely expensive and too onerous to roll. So you can forget SMEs adopting them at any point of time, who themselves do not even have a decent tech footprint in the first place. So what I see is it's not just an issue of capital. It's a much larger issue of the outcome. What am I trying to accomplish? Do I need it? So the point Dato made, and I will close my view here, is it digitization or digitalization? We unfortunately use these two terms very interchangeably, and they are not the same. Most of the MSMEs in the last 5 years have started digitizing their manual procedures and policies. It does not necessarily make them smarter. It is just that they've taken their old problems and shifted it into the digital world. Now, digitalization is a completely different animal altogether, where you're looking at removing silos to the information flows, which means security has to be an end-to-end view and not a siloed view of saying, if I keep my computers virus-free, I'm good. It doesn't work that way. I think we have to look at it in that context.
Nice. Thank you for that, Bobby. Two things. We've got, I think, some polls that have popped up online. So if anyone would, if you're watching, do fill in those polls so we can get a little bit more intelligence from this session as well. But one of the questions that has come up and really is kind of a basic how-to guide. What are, in a sense, the 3 steps that companies should do. And I think, Rivera, you mentioned it earlier, the IT guy, and how important is the IT guy in this context. And kind of for me as well, we think of the IT guy who does the website, but now because it's related to, this is related to a computer, the IT guy understands everything. What do you see? Is that a potential transformation that, a step up that the guy who's doing the websites need to now move into cybersecurity? And is that possible? What do you see?
I think something's going to have to happen. I think with so many businesses, it's sort of like, has been a transformation. Before, a lot of businesses were reluctant to allow remote employees. They didn't trust employees. They didn't feel comfortable. And now they realize, wait, there's a lot of cost savings involved if I let my employees work from home. And here in the US, we are such a physically large country that working remotely gives you access to employees in other parts of the country who might actually be cheaper because they live in a part of the country with a lower cost of living. And so people are adopting that, and then they're faced with, like you said, okay, what do we do about IT security? I was talking to some people a few weeks ago who they used to be called the VARs, the value-added resellers, and now they're channel partners. And a lot of the channel partners are reaching out more into the smaller and smaller businesses who they used to ignore because they thought, not worth my money, I don't want to work with a company that has 3 employees, not worth our time. But they're reaching out to them because they realize there's a lot of need there, and there's a lot of need quickly. So they know it's a fast payday because these companies need to get secure. And I don't think like the web hosts are necessarily equipped to do that. And I'm not sure that many of them feel like they can't. Like, how am I going to learn that? And so I think there's actually opens up a whole business opportunity for people who are adept at cybersecurity to look at the small business market. In the US, we have probably altogether, there's about 30 million small businesses, about 6.5 million with employees. But as you know, you don't really need employees to run a good size, healthy business today. So there's a lot of opportunity there to go in and set up a cybersecurity protection company.
Dr. Amiruddin, now tell us about what Malaysia is doing from a policy perspective and also addressing this kind of gap in the market for cybersecurity. And is there a role that the government needs to facilitate together with a kind of human capital component of developing this problem?
Thank you, Nordin. Actually, I think 1 or 2 months ago, government has launched what we call Malaysia Cybersecurity Strategy for 2020 to 2024. And it covers 5 strategic pillars. The first one is actually focusing on effective governance and management. So it's about how to manage the various government entity, private sectors. How do we work together? That's basically to sum up. Because cybersecurity, you cannot work alone. You have to work together. Okay, and then pillar 2 is on strengthening legislative framework and enforcement. So that's focusing on the legal aspects, about strengthening the enforcement aspect. Third is on catalyzing world-class innovation, technology, R&D, and industry. So that's the third pillar of the strategy. The fourth pillar is the one that you highlighted just now. It's about enhancing capacity and capability building, awareness, and education. Mm-hmm. Obviously, the people aspect is very important. Also, as part of the Malaysians' strategy with regards to the issue of cybersecurity. And the last one, the pillar 5, is on strengthening global collaboration. Because when we talk about cybersecurity, it is not a local issue; it's a global issue. So we need to work collaboratively, domestically, and also at the international level. So going back to the aspects of people, that one that you highlighted, we feel that when it comes to cybersecurity, actually the weakest link is people. And as such, it is very important to look at cybersecurity from strengthening that part. And well, it is important also to look into other aspects. And to us, if we want to see cybersecurity, it has to be holistic. That means it covers the aspects of people, process, and technology. But normally, when it comes to technology, they do invest in technology to ensure that they are more safe and secure, protected, etc. And they also embedded some policy and process to strengthen the management of information, especially the security of the information, protection of data, etc. in the organization. But the tough part is on the people. And people tends to look at only at the IT practitioner, the IT people. When actually in cybersecurity, anyone can be the weakest point or can be the vulnerable point where the attack can comes in. So that is why in the context of Malaysia, through Cybersecurity Malaysia, for example, we have developed a capacity building framework, and also awareness and education framework. So at the if you look in terms of the pyramid, for example, at the lowest part, we have a program called CyberSafe. CyberSafe stands for Security Awareness for Everyone. So SAFE stands for Security Awareness for Everyone. This is for those who use digital technology, not people who is a practitioner. I mean, they can be part of it, but basically the focus is about telling that user of the internet, you have to be wary of the environment, digital environment out there. You need to be cautious. You need to, I'll say, conduct best practices when it comes to when you are online, whether you are individual or you are as a workers or employees in any organization, the best practices. So these are the tips that we provide. So that is the program for, we call it CyberSafe, Security Awareness for Everyone. Mm-hmm. The next level up of the triangle is basically, we call it Competency Training. This is a program that in cybersecurity, we call it Cyber Guru, where we provide various types of technical and management training for practitioners. When I mean by practitioner, that means people who's in the organization, who, for example, IT people, who require certain skills for them to conduct their work. So that's something that we provide training for a few days for them to master the skills so that they can know what to do. And the same thing also applies on aspects of management side, in terms of risk management, in terms of governance, in terms of compliance. So that is on the aspects of the second layer, we call it Cyber Guru. And the top one, the tip of the triangle, is we call it professional certification and education. This is for those who not only needed or required for competency, but they also want to be recognized as a professional by itself in helping to protect and secure the environment, the organization, whatever. So this is a professional program called Global Accredited Cybersecurity Education Scheme, which is developed by Cybersecurity Malaysia together with our industry partners, with academia, and even some input from the public sector. It is actually industry-driven and vendor neutral, and help to build the right talent, right people who are capable and competent enough to protect the organization. So that is the approach. So we do not only focusing on just normal IT practitioner, but it covers from just the normal user up to the one who wants to be a professional. And we believe that's the best way to handle, because the weakest link in cybersecurity is the people.
Yeah. If I may add, Nordin, to this point.
Go ahead, Nordin.
There was a question on data governance, and I think it's an extremely important question. One of the things that we have not seen policy catch up with industry is the elimination of silos with policy makers or policy making institutions. And this has been true of almost all the world, right? So you got regulators for each different industrial sector, and they work in their own little worlds, and they are in complete control of whether it's the Securities Commission, whether it is the central banks, whether it's a telecommunications agency, whatever. However, users, you and I and everyone on this call, our data flows through all the industries. The day you buy a food, it goes through a banking provider by way of your payment data. It gives you a select details to all the Walmarts and the retailers of the world. You know, you're crossing telecoms networks. So your data is fungible. The data fungibility is not what we are understanding sufficiently enough. So to Dato's point, the people are the weakest link. Yes, we are the weakest link, because the ones who can create that strength, the regulators, do not collaborate. That is extremely important. Now, regulators' collaboration is the new reality, and it has nothing to do with COVID. It is just the pace of data being created. So I think we also need to have regulators coming together and creating frameworks where that information and knowledge know-how is cross-pollinated, so that at any point of time, a citizen's data remains safe from whatever his utility is. We haven't spent enough time. I think that's the biggest picture of data governance.
Okay. Now, Bobby, let's have a little bit of fun with this. Now, if we look at the concept of crisis management, we often look at threats, and we often look at how will these attacks happen. Now, in your opinion, if you were to go out and try and hit a target in that sense, and put yourself in the mind of someone who is going to infiltrate a company, what would be your first port of action? And the kind of reason I'm getting to this is what should SMEs do first to deal with a malicious attack, and where do you think it would come from?
Great question, and it ties to what Riva experienced a few years ago. It's always called endpoint security. The thing is, the vulnerability of a person is found out at his extremities. It's always at the extremity. You do not know the core yet, right? Only if you are working for an organization, you may know its core and say, okay, I'll go to hit the servers directly. But if you're sitting on the outside as a hacker, as a malicious intended individual, I'll look for the extremities. And all the extremities typically come in the form of websites and portals as a starting point. Your emails. These are all clear. So when you're getting links, just don't be stupid and click them on, right? And we get so many links in a given day, because that is the entry point for the hacker to test the efficacy of your existing security. And it's also your behavior. So endpoint security, today when a Symantec or a Kaspersky is talking about endpoint security, we don't tend to take it too seriously. But I think endpoint security has to be embedded as your brass tacks hygiene. And then, what you can do is distinguish between the attempts versus the real vulnerabilities. Technically, I think that you will agree with me, the hardcore attempts are approximately 4% of actual attempts. The ones that have really succeeded are only 4%. So there are 96% of the attempts that fail through because at some point in the chain, from an endpoint to a midpoint, they get thwarted out. But endpoint entry is where if you stop, 80% of the endpoints entry, if you stop, your overall size of vulnerabilities in a given year itself shrinks dramatically to over 20% of let's say a last year's sample. Now that 20% you can make it robust, right? So I agree with that. On the people side of it, it's our behavior and how we keep our data safe. Simple things like our wireless passwords. all of those little things we get reminded of, we have taken it for granted, but that is where somebody explodes the vulnerability.
Okay. Now, the other thing that we've got a bunch of questions here. I've got to try and get through all of them. Thank you very much, everyone, and keep them coming. So I'm going to put a group of 3 together. How do we keep updated on types of cyber attacks? Is there like a database or a website that we can go to learn more about cyber attacks? And then the other question we've got here is, what kind of percentages are we looking at in terms of attacks going directly for SMEs, and is there any data or research on that? And of course, I think everyone's looking for the silver bullet, this software. What software? And of course, we're not here to sell any software. So, I'll open it to the floor and start with perhaps Ms. Rivia. Where do you see things happening in the US, and how do we get this whole picture together?
Well, first, the attack I told you about was actually our 3rd attack. We had 2 much smaller ones, and they were when we were on a shared server. So because we were new, we were starting out, we thought we'd save money. So the first thing we learned is don't ever be on a shared server. If you can, afford, and it's not a whole lot more to be on your own server, you're a lot more secure that way. So you start out that way, and I think you have to kind of just say, there's a very good chance we're going to be attacked. How would we protect ourselves, and outsource that information? Small businesses aren't going to be able to afford to hire the kind of people with that knowledge in their companies. They're just not. It sucks up too much of the budget. So find a third-party company that you trust, that maybe check, with other small business owners, check with your local chamber of commerce, check with an organization. We have an organization here called SCORE, which is free mentorship to small businesses. So check with a SCORE mentor to find out, okay, what's the best way for you, in my community, the best person, the best company that can supply that kind of protection. And then don't be cheap about it. You have to, I think this is really hard for a lot of small business owners. They're always watching their pennies. And you have to realize now, with so much more vulnerability being at home, that that if you're going to be cheap, you could lose your whole business, right? I was on a panel a couple of years ago, 2 years ago, that was sponsored by the Wall Street Journal, and a guy from a hospital. It was a small hospital in the U.S., a small chain, but not a small business, and they had ransomware attacks. Because they were going after records of patients, which is, highly private here. And they thought, well, we've got security, we're fine. And they weren't. And so I think it's, you have to find a company that, what do they say? You have to constantly test yourself, test your vulnerability. Don't just sit back and say, okay, we're fine. We haven't been, attacked in 3 weeks, so we're okay. And so you have to find a company you trust that will be able to do that.
And I think this idea, and I think you mentioned it earlier, this concept of digital assets. The moment you start thinking of them as digital assets is the reason why someone wants to attack it, so that they can get their hands on it. It's worth something. And perhaps also there's a component of, the accountants who are watching, who need to be able to understand that digital assets also need to go on a balance sheet, so that they can be valued in this kind of context as well, if we're talking about the broader economic concept of digital assets. Dato, what are the kind of data that you've got and you've seen also at the OIC level? I know you're very involved at the OIC level, that you've seen some of the developments there.
Okay, for SME, there's a study by, call it Beasley Breach Response 2019. It stated that 71% of the ransomware attack is actually targeted at the SMEs. And at the average cost is about $116,234 per attack. This is the kind of cost that it will incur to the SMEs. And only, I would say, 14% businesses are prepared to defend against this type of attacks. So that's one in terms of ransomware, because just now Riva also mentioned about ransomware. At the same time, in the context of Malaysia, there was a study also by CHAP Malaysia SME Cyber Preparedness Report 2019. Stated that about 1/3 or 37% of SME leaders in Malaysia say their employees' poor understanding of potential cyber threats is actually is challenging their ability to protect their business from associated cyber risk. And another Verizon Business 2020 data breach investigations report mentioned that about 28% of data breaches in 2020 involved small businesses. So you can say that ransomware, data breach is actually one of the key, I would say, type of attacks. And then in fact, it relate back to the digital assets about data, and that's organization, especially the SMEs. In the context of cybersecurity in Malaysia, we also have what we call Cyber 999 Help Center, where people will report incidents to us. And when we receive the reports, we will categorize them into the various categories. And we found that of the total incidents of the 9 categories that were reported to us, about 70% are related to fraud. So this, where you can, it all relates to money, because ransomware is also about money.
Yeah.
They lock the file to get the money. They lock your data, which is actually the digital asset is the most valuable is data. And when breach, it's also back to about data. And then this is where, because basically the motive is about, again, money. And even more now, especially the last first 6 months of the year, because of the COVID and because of the movement control order, the MCO, so everyone locked into at home, and they have to do everything online. So as a result, more people are connected, and we in Cybersecurity Malaysia receive even more incidents related to, I would say, various like fraud, intrusion, and cyber harassment during that period. It's like, I would say, close to 80% increase compared to the same period last year. So that is some of the statistics, threats that's happening both at I would say SME level and even at the internet users level.
Now, Bobby, we've also got someone has linked kind of cybersecurity and with the question here on cybersecurity and espionage. Now, what level are we talking about here in terms of cybersecurity and espionage? Of course, I always remember, I can't remember which James Bond movie it was, that Q said, hey, I can do more damage with my laptop than you can do with all your fancy gadgets. So as the gentleman wearing the comfortable, nice-looking suit, you're going to have to answer the James Bond question today. What level of espionage are we seeing? And is, of course, we're hearing of state-based actors. We're hearing of, these corporations also linked to state-based actors and a broader economic reality. And how does that kind of link back to what SMEs should be very aware of?
See, I think it's, so let's take the espionage piece first, and whether it's state-based or driven by state actors or non-state actors. Competition, for example, is at its highest peak given open borders. That also creates unsavory actors anyway. And you have seen that happen in many parts of the world. I can talk of countries like Iran, Nicaragua, Guatemala in the early 90s, through to South Africa and Nigeria. Now, as we speak, Asia had its own share of being the recipient of vulnerability-based attacks by both state and non-state actors, right? Where all of these espionage related? No, not necessarily. I think the sexy component of the James Bond is only applicable to so much of an extent. I think it is access to resources. Now, what kind of resources? That's what Dato mentioned a point. It's the data. The amount of data that you're generating. And a lot of this data, I think, at a country level, at a national level, they are considered to be critical information infrastructure. Like our roads and bridges and buildings, how critical they are to us because they are part of the physical infrastructure and network of our trade and economy. Same is the information infrastructure, and we have to protect them. Now, the access to this information infrastructure is actually heightened because they're all connected to international gateways. We are not isolated as a nation. No nation is, right? So we are connected by way of thousands of these submarine cables going all over the world. So people are looking for those endpoint vulnerabilities to get into the system. So state or non-state, if they're able to find that particular individual or an entity that gives them access, that is the reason then you're able to kind of penetrate further. One of the biggest reasons why you see defense networks anywhere on the planet are completely independent of the rest of the networks within the country. Anywhere, including Malaysia's defense network is on its own. They're isolated from the rest of the networks. And there is a reason for that, because that is the highest level of national security threats, right? But you can also talk of the banking infrastructure, but you cannot disconnect our banks from the rest of the world. So then you have to have those secure protocols, that entire end-to-end security in a very robust manner. And that's where you need not just the money, but a whole lot of intelligence to be able to handle them on a proactive basis. That's where regulations come to play as well. SMEs, are they a contributor to it? No, they may actually be an unwitting enabler, because they are also connected to the world.
What do you mean by that? What do you mean by that? Yeah.
So I could probably find a very vulnerable website of an SME, right? And who's written on his website, he's supplying nuts and bolts to a car manufacturer. But I need an access to the car manufacturer, because from him, I can start going into the larger pieces of the economy. I'm looking at routes, right? If I'm exploring multiple routes, this SME who's just making nuts and bolts, maybe 1,000 bolts a month, is my entry point. And I might as well go in, hack him, and from there trace my route all the way possibly down to the central bank itself. Therefore, I think what SMEs need to understand is that endpoint security, digital asset security is not just about their own business, but it is their role in the economy. They might be unwitting actors to a crime that they never thought would happen by them, but they become part of the problem, right?
Exactly.
That's the thing you have to be careful of.
And today, if I could just say, today, with the world being more collaborative, with people doing business cross borders a lot more easily, a lot of Americans were kind of caught short earlier this year in their supply chain, right? A lot of them relied on supply chain from China. China shut down first. I know companies, friends of mine owned, who couldn't get product in February because China was not their regular factories weren't manufacturing, and they were scrambling for new suppliers. And what they've learned from this is we need to diversify the supply chain. But so they're doing business with companies all over the world, and they may think, okay, we're safe, but like Bobby said, what if that manufacturer in Malaysia or in Vietnam or somewhere is not? And they're all of a sudden they're vulnerable because they've been hacked. And so it's a big concern worldwide. That's something we need to settle, not just in our own countries, because we are all connected.
One thing I also wanted to ask you about is on, now we talk about all of this, but we see that there's also a reputation management component to this, because we see, what happens to a company when, something bad happens. This is, the media loves a bad story, and how can we as SMEs create a competitive advantage for being a component of the broader and deeper supply chain, especially as companies look to deepen their understanding of supply chain management. How do you see that reputation piece playing out in countries like the US?
The reputation piece is really big. I think again, in the last example I gave, if I'm a US retailer or wholesaler and I'm looking for products to supply, I want to make sure that the company that I'm doing business with is secure, and as secure as I can be assured that they are, so I'm not going to be vulnerable there. But even here, in terms of reputation, big companies, really big household name companies in the US, a couple of years ago, it was Home Depot, I think. They were attacked, they were vulnerable, and all of a sudden people are like, well, why should I do business there if they couldn't protect themselves? And this week, the US government, there are at least 4 or 5 agencies that have been hacked. And one of them is the Commerce Department, which is, I actually got an email today from a small business that does business with the Commerce Department, who said to me, am I vulnerable? Am I exposed? And I'm like, I don't know, because they haven't said what they went in and did there or what was the point. And so it's really important, if you are hacked, if something happens, don't try to hide something. Don't try to not tell your clients, because that's your reputation. Your reputation will be hurt more if you lie or cover up than if you're honest and say, we were hacked. Here's what you need to do, and give them explicit instructions. I got one a couple weeks ago from a bigger company that said, we were hacked, but they didn't get into credit card information. They just, here's sort of what they did. And don't worry about it. A couple years ago, my Target was hacked, and my sister's account was one of the ones that was vulnerable, and people actually charged money on her card. Obviously she didn't have to pay for it, but you need to just get out in front of it and then really continually tell people, we've got it under control. Here's what we're doing. Don't worry about it. And if somebody asks you, like, am I vulnerable? Don't lie and say no if they are.
Exactly. And I think, Dato, what kind of competitive advantages can countries create by improving a cybersecurity ecosystem? Can that be a point of competitive behavior for different countries? Is that something that Malaysia can look at, and also at the different developing nations? We've got people joining from all over the world, I noticed. How are they going to compete if they are unable to deliver on a safe cyber environment for domestic and foreign investors?
Thank you, Nordin. I think you raised an important point about confidence, and it also relates to trust. Because if you want to, any entity wants to invest in any country, and you want to have trust that they are protected, the business are protected and safe. And obviously, cybersecurity will be part of that. And an important component, because now everything goes digital. So even the economy is digital, we call it. Going back to the discussion earlier by Riva, by Bobby, we've been talking a lot about international cross-border business. Basically, it's about supply chain. I call it supply chain security. And it is very important that, because there's one product, but the supply can come from any parts of the world.
Yeah.
And that's how, if you to ensure that people will believe and trust and have confidence in the products that you have, and then you want companies to invest. Obviously, building must be there, confidence building. And in the context of this is where I think going back on for the SMEs, for example, for them to be trusted supplier to whoever the companies that they are supplying to. It is important for them to embed security from the beginning, secure by design. It will give the level of confidence. At the same time, they need to also ensure that they do not focus just on normal traditional security, because traditional security approach no longer sufficient, especially during the smart threats, with advanced threats. So there's a need to approach what we call a defense in depth or multi-layered defense. Because it has to cover from the aspects of people, policy, process, and technology all together. And it's also important for them to conduct risk management and to identify even possible threats in the supply chain and put in place cyber security measures to address those threats. Same time, for companies to really comply to international standard, so that they can give level confidence whoever that they supply to. And the company also needs to be evaluated in terms of the security and in terms of the privacy policies for all their suppliers. So this is some of the, I would say, tips or approach that can help to build a competitive advantage, whatever you call it, or even a level of confidence. And they also need to be updated with the latest knowledge and skill, because technology change fast. I can tell you, it change faster than any legal framework. Legal framework is very slow. But, and for sure, it always lag behind. But it is important for us to keep abreast of the new and emerging and current technology that's out there.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, if I may add, Nordin, one of the things that yesterday just came out is that Malaysia, along with Oman and Australia, is the third most highly ready country in the world for cybersecurity. So there's a global cybersecurity index that is published by the World Economic Forum in conjunction with ABI Research. So just last morning, it came to be out of the top 20, Malaysia is actually number 3, and the only other Islamic world country figuring in the top 20, because we're talking about the Islamic Economic Forum, is Oman.
Yes.
So it's quite interesting. Singapore is actually number 19. Just to kind of contextualize, first and second are US and Canada.
It's good for Malaysia to beat Singapore, I can tell you.
Even you got countries like Germany and Korea, UK, Austria, Hungary, all of them in the 10 to 20. So definitely, I think Dato Amir and his team are doing something really phenomenal. But what it's important now is how do you sustain it, right? It's no longer about ranks. Now that you got up there, you got the standards. Now, how are you going to sustain it? At a government level, whatever the government can do, it has done. Now it becomes important that the private sector adopt it and not rest on their laurels. Like somebody was asking a question, what are the standards? There are global standards. You've got to adopt them. ISO 27001, 27032. There are these different standards. They may feel very painful to adopt, but they are your necessary evil, if you like. So that is where I think, Dato, your point you're making about the triangle, where you're talking about safe at the bottom end, it will allow people to, have that emphasis on standards and ensure that security is for everyone, not just for large companies in the KLSE index, But that is not going to come by government telling people what to do. Every single owner of the organizations that they own have to take it seriously. If they're not going to take it seriously, they're becoming a part of the problem.
Okay. Now we also got a few more questions coming in. I really appreciate everyone's questions. And of course, we've got to get through these in the next couple of minutes. Questions around passwords and all this kind of stuff, as well as are there companies who we can call upon to develop contingency plans and is there a ready market for companies who are part of the solution providers for SMEs, and how can we get those guys? Or is it an opportunity that Malaysia should, or any other country for that matter, become a kind of a beacon for the developed world?
No. I think let's not kind of second guess economic activity as to be driven by a national government, right? Let the private sector do what it does best. It chases the best of its standards. The best of the companies will come out from anywhere. So there are a whole range of consulting organizations, whether they're in Malaysia or worldwide. Just do a Google search, you can find a lot of them. Talk to a few people in the industry, they might give you references. There is no silver bullet here. I think let's be very clear. We are looking for simple answers to a very complex problem. Don't simplify, please. Life is complex. This entire world, the virtual world, is extremely complex. If you do not understand the complexity, you will cause problems to your own businesses. Don't look for quick and easy solutions that you plug and play and say, I'm fine. It doesn't work that way, unfortunately. By the time you implement a solution, it has become obsolete. That's the unfortunate age of obsolescence we are living in. But Malaysia has a lot of these small companies who do consulting, who build those contingency plans for you. And it is not going to come for free. So don't expect that the government is going to dole out these kind of services as well. There is a role the government should play, and there's a role the government should not play. And this is the role the government should not play.
Okay, excellent. Riva, what's your point there?
Well, one of the things to remember is your plan might work when you're, maybe this big, maybe you have 3 employees and you're doing, $200,000 in sales, and then you get bigger and you don't, you're concentrating on sales and marketing and product development, and you're not thinking about that. So now you're bigger and you have more vulnerabilities. You have also more to lose, and you haven't kept up. You're secure to this, but now you're this, and you haven't kept up. So it's really important to do to check on this like twice a year to make sure that what you have is adequate to where you are today, and not to what it is when you bought this software or hired this company. You might have hired a company that works really well with micro businesses, but not with, you know, larger small businesses. So you need to constantly keep on top of this.
Okay, brilliant, brilliant. Well, we've actually gone a good 10 minutes over time, which is wonderful. This whole thing has just flown by. But I do want to give everyone a last 1 or 2 minutes to just sum up what you're thinking today, where you think we should go, and what you see as the kind of post-COVID reality. I always like this post-COVID economy, but also how do we see this thing playing out in the next 1 or 2 months and the next 1 or 2 years? So I'll start with you, Rivia.
So I think that post-COVID here is going to, well, it's not even going to start till at least maybe 6 months from now. And I think it's going to look a lot like COVID does. I think we're going to have more remote businesses, more businesses permanently at home looking for these cyber solutions that maybe they didn't need before. We're going to have more retailers who are now actively involved in e-commerce and are looking to protect those activities as well. So I think there's a lot of opportunity on the technological end for people who have companies to come in, sort of like what Bobby said. You can't oversimplify this. Don't think, oh, here's this, you know, it's not a plug and play thing, right? It's not like word processing software that changes, but, you know, like it doesn't matter if you're using it from 2 years ago. So it's about selling, it's about being open to buying solutions to invest. It's an investment. People don't think of it as an investment, but it's an investment in protecting your business. And I don't remember the number offhand, but I think one of the big tech protection companies here did a survey and found that kind of a large percentage of small businesses that were attacked were out of business within 2 years. Like, they could not build back. And so you don't want to lose your business that way. And I think that's going to continue.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Bobby, over to you. What's your forecast?
My view is that, you know, you got to build resilience, whether you're a small firm or a large firm, and resilience is not going to come easy. You have to take it step by step. You have to build a roadmap and then, you know, kind of plod your way through it. Seek help. Don't try and be a hero. You cannot do it all. You don't know how to do it all either anyway. And so don't look for shortcuts, right? Money is out there. Capital is the last of the problems for SMEs. I think we always tend to think of let the money come and then I'll do it all. But get the ideas up and running. Money is out there. Billions of dollars is available, because everyone acknowledges that SMEs are a backbone of the developing world anyway. And VCs do not really balk at funding SMEs any longer. That was the past. They actually like small and medium companies who are more flexible. But I think one thing I would like to share is that just be realistic that today there is no longer two worlds, a virtual world and a real world. Those do not exist any longer. They are a mix. I call them the real world. We live in a world where you are constantly switching between the real world and the virtual world. So learn to deal with it. And an SME or a big company, the ones who cannot deal with that are going to be dead. Like Riva's point, you will be dead in a year. So that's the reality I think we have to acknowledge and then move forward.
Got it. So Dato', it falls on you for the last word. What do you see as our next steps and moving forward?
I think after post-COVID-19, the world is getting more and more connected. And then obviously the reliance of this digital technology, as I mentioned, will also increase. We need to understand that the issue of cybersecurity will also increase. But cybersecurity is not the responsibility of government, private sector. It's actually everyone's responsibility. And everyone has to play part and play their role, including the SMEs. And they have to understand, yes, cybersecurity may be costly, but insecurity even more costly. So it needs to manage that, and it has to be seen not as a constraint, but an enabler to their business. It has to be seen not as a technological problem, but also a business problem. And as such, then only they will see cybersecurity as an important catalyst to their growth. And that's what SMEs should play and should look at cybersecurity, and obviously with more connected world, with more connectivity, yes, that's the way. We can't move beyond cybersecurity. We have to adopt it and embed it from the design stage of any growth of the company. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dato. And for the those in the media joining us, I think there's been plenty of good quotes and none better than that. So I would like to thank all our panelists today. Dato Dr. Haji Amiruddin Abdul Wahab, the CEO of Cybersecurity Malaysia, Bobby Varanasi, the founding chairman and CEO of Maritel Consulting Inc., and of course, Rivera Lesonsky, and I got it right this time, I believe, the president and chief executive officer of GrowBiz Media in the US. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to our lovely, who will take us in for landing.
Yes, all right. Now, thank you so much to all our speakers and everybody and everyone for being here today and making this webinar a successful one. Now, so please, from here on, please spare some time to complete the survey form we've prepared for you at the end of the session. Now, please also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, YouTube for regular news and happenings. Now, on behalf of WIEF Foundation, thank you for joining us today and have a great day ahead.